The great hall of the Lyran Palace shimmered like liquid crystal. Light poured from the ceiling, refracting through tall spires that curved like frozen waves. The alien empire had always been known for its artistry, and to the humans who had traveled across the stars to meet them, it felt like stepping into a dream. The delegation from Earth walked carefully, their boots clicking against polished silver floors that sang faintly with every step. Among them was Daniel Hayes, the youngest envoy in the group. His uniform was neat, his posture as straight as he could manage, but inside, he was restless. He had studied for months to prepare for this mission. The languages, the customs, the gestures of respect. He had promised himself he would not make even a single mistake. This was humanity's first invitation to the royal court of the Lyrans, and failure was not an option. Daniel's mind, however, was clouded with nerves. The air in the palace felt heavier than he expected, charged with an invisible weight. Every guard that lined the walls stood tall in elegant armor, their glowing eyes fixed forward, their expressions unreadable. The other humans in his delegation looked calm, but Daniel could see their unease in the way they tightened their grips on their data tablets or adjusted their collars. At the far end of the hall sat the royal family, elevated upon a dais of white stone. The king, a tall figure with hair like flowing silver threads, gazed upon the delegation with a serene but distant expression. To his right sat the queen, her robes adorned with soft crystal patterns. And between them, radiant yet composed, sat Princess Serenia. Daniel had read about her in the archives. The princess was known for her silence. She rarely spoke in public, and when she did, her words were brief and measured. Her people believed she carried the weight of prophecy, though no outsider knew the details. Looking at her now, Daniel felt a strange mix of awe and unease. Her eyes were the color of midnight skies, and when she turned her gaze toward the humans, he felt as though she could see through the layers of his thoughts. The formal ceremony began with greetings. One by one, the human envoys bowed and offered words of respect in the Lyran tongue. Daniel had practiced his line countless times. He was supposed to step forward, place his hand upon his chest, and say in their language, "I honor your wisdom." When his turn came, Daniel felt the weight of hundreds of alien eyes upon him. His heart pounded. He stepped forward, bowed as rehearsed, and opened his mouth to speak. But nerves tangled his memory. The words twisted, and what left his lips was not the phrase of respect he had studied. Instead, he said, "I love you." The hall froze. The sound of his voice seemed to echo endlessly against the crystal walls. The guards stiffened, the nobles drew sharp breaths, and even the king's calm expression wavered for a moment. Daniel's heart dropped into his stomach. He realized his mistake instantly. He had confused the Lyran words for honor and love, which were painfully similar to his still untrained tongue. He wanted to take it back, to correct himself, but the silence was too heavy. His voice caught, his throat dry. Then something unexpected happened. The princess tilted her head slightly. Her eyes softened, and for the first time that day, her lips curved in the faintest smile. Her voice, clear and calm, carried across the hall as she whispered, almost too softly for the humans to hear. At last. The silence deepened. The king turned his gaze toward his daughter. The queen's hand froze in mid-gesture, and the nobles exchanged wide-eyed glances. Daniel stood rooted to the floor, unsure if he had just ruined the entire mission or stumbled into something far greater than he could understand. The ceremony ended without explanation. The humans were led to their quarters with polite but guarded formality. The other envoys whispered among themselves, their voices sharp with worry. Daniel heard his name again and again, each time followed by words like disaster, insult, and unforgivable. He sank onto the edge of the bed in his chamber, pressing his hands over his face. What had he done? Hours later, a soft chime at his door startled him. Before he could respond, the door slid open, and Princess Serenia herself stepped into his quarters. Her robes glimmered faintly in the dim light, and her presence filled the room like a quiet storm. Daniel leapt to his feet, stammering apologies. but she raised a hand to silence him. "You spoke the words," she said calmly, her voice carrying a weight he could not name. I didn't mean," Daniel began, but she stepped closer. "You do not understand yet," she continued. "Our records speak of a voice not of our world, a voice that would break silence with devotion and awaken the path I was bound to walk. Many thought it only a tale, but when you spoke, the prophecy stirred." Daniel's mouth went dry. "Prophecy? You think I know," she said simply. Her gaze pierced him, steady and unwavering. "You are not here by accident. Your mistake was no mistake at all." Daniel shook his head. He wanted to argue, to insist that it was nothing more than his clumsy tongue, but something in her eyes silenced him. She did not look at him as a fool or an intruder. She looked at him as if she had been waiting for him all her life. The thought both terrified and amazed him. Before he could speak again, she turned toward the door. "You must be careful," she said. "Many will see you as a threat. They will not all welcome the words you have spoken. But know this, you have already changed everything." With that, she left, leaving Daniel standing in stunned silence. That night, he lay awake, staring at the ceiling of his chamber. His mind replayed the moment again and again. The slip of his tongue, the silence of the hall, the princess's whisper. He had come here to serve as a minor envoy, to prove himself useful in small ways, to stay unnoticed. Instead, he had spoken 3 words that shook the foundation of an empire. And now, whether he wanted it or not, the fate of 2 worlds might rest upon them. The palace corridors glowed faintly in the dim light of dawn. Daniel walked slowly, his mind restless after a night without sleep. The princess's words echoed again and again inside his head. "You have already changed everything." He wanted to believe it was just a misunderstanding, nothing more than a mistake. Yet deep down, he knew there was more to it. The delegation leader, Ambassador Green, was waiting for him in the dining chamber. The older man looked stern, his sharp eyes fixed on Daniel the moment he entered. The other envoys sat quietly, pretending to eat their meals, but Daniel could feel their unease filling the air. "Do you know what you've done?" Green asked in a low, steady voice. Daniel sat down, unsure how to answer. "I made a mistake," he said finally. "A mistake?" Green's jaw tightened. "You told their princess you love her. In front of her father. In front of their court. Do you understand the kind of disaster that could mean for us?" "I didn't mean it," Daniel said, his voice shaking. The words sounded too close. "I thought I said honor." "It came out wrong." The ambassador leaned back, rubbing his temples. "The Lyrans live by tradition. Their language is tied to ancient vows. A single misplaced phrase can change the meaning of an entire treaty. If this offends them, Earth's relations with the Empire could collapse before they've even begun." Daniel swallowed hard, guilt tightening in his chest. But before he could answer, a soft chime rang at the door. A palace guard entered, tall and graceful in polished armor. He bowed slightly and spoke in a voice both calm and firm. "Princess Serenia requests the presence of Daniel Hayes in the royal archives." The room went silent. Every human envoy turned their eyes toward Daniel. Ambassador Green's brow furrowed. "The princess herself?" "Yes," the guard replied. "She says it concerns the words he spoke yesterday." Daniel's pulse quickened. He wanted to refuse, to stay hidden and let the storm pass, but the thought of ignoring her request felt impossible. Slowly, he stood and followed the guard out. The archives lay deep beneath the palace, carved into the very heart of the mountain on which the city stood. As Daniel stepped into the chamber, he felt a chill unlike anything in the upper halls. Towering shelves of crystal tablets rose into the shadows above, glowing faintly with etched symbols that shimmered as if alive. At the center stood Princess Serenia. She looked almost otherworldly in the dim light, her robes flowing around her like strands of moonlight. When she turned to him, her eyes held both calm and intensity, as though she had been waiting for him. "You came," she said softly. Daniel bowed awkwardly, unsure of the proper gesture. I didn't think I had a choice." "There is always a choice," Serenia replied. She gestured toward a long table covered with ancient tablets. "Do you know what these are?" Daniel shook his head. "They are our prophecies," she explained. "Writings passed down from before memory, speaking of paths yet to come. Most are forgotten or ignored, but some are remembered, especially by the royal line. She touched one of the glowing tablets, and symbols lit up across its surface. Daniel could not read them, but he felt the weight of their meaning pressing against his mind. Serenya's voice grew softer, more deliberate. One of them speaks of silence. It says that a daughter of the stars will be born into silence, unable to speak of the heart. Her voice will remain bound until a stranger from beyond the skies breaks it with words of devotion. Only then will her true path begin. Daniel felt his chest tighten. You think that's me? But I didn't mean to. Does meaning matter? She asked, her gaze steady. The words were spoken, and when they were, something inside me broke free. For years I have been silent, bound by tradition, bound by prophecy, but when you spoke, I felt the chains fall away. I whispered at last because I had been waiting for the voice that would free me. Daniel's throat went dry. He wanted to protest, to insist that it was just an accident. But deep down he knew he could not deny what had happened. Something had shifted. The weight of her words pressed against him, heavy yet strangely comforting. But your people, he said slowly. They didn't look happy. Some seemed angry. They'll see me as a mistake, not a savior. Serenya nodded. Yes, many will reject it. Some will call it fate, others will call it insult. There will be those who fear change. But the prophecy does not ask their permission. It has already begun. Daniel stepped back, his mind spinning. He had dreamed of being useful to the mission, of proving himself more than the junior member of the delegation. But this was far greater than he had ever imagined. What do you want from me? He asked quietly. Serenya looked at him for a long moment before answering. I want truth. Not ceremony, not tradition, truth. Did you mean the words when you spoke them? Daniel froze. He thought back to the hall, to the pounding of his heart, to the way her eyes had met his. He had meant respect, not love. And yet in the instant he had spoken, something inside him had stirred. A spark, faint but real. I don't know, he admitted. Maybe not then, but now. Maybe yes. Serenya's lips curved in the faintest smile. That is enough. Word of their meeting spread quickly. By evening, whispers moved through the palace like wildfire. Nobles argued in private chambers. Some said the prophecy had been fulfilled at last. Others claimed the humans were using tricks to seize influence over the royal family. The council began to divide, tension rising with every hour. Ambassador Green confronted Daniel again, his face red with worry. Do you realize what you're doing? You're not just some envoy now. You've been pulled into their politics, their traditions. You could tear this mission apart. I didn't ask for this, Daniel said firmly, but it's happening anyway. If I walk away now, it might look worse. Green sighed heavily, pressing a hand to his forehead. You're playing with fire, Hayes. Be careful you don't burn us all. That night, Daniel stood on the balcony of his chamber, staring out at the alien city below. Towers of crystal rose like frozen lightning, glowing softly in the night. Ships drifted in the skies, silent and graceful. Yet all he could think about was the princess's eyes, the certainty in her voice when she said the prophecy had begun. He had come here as no one important, just a young envoy eager to prove himself. Now he was caught in something far greater, a destiny written long before he was born. And though fear twisted inside him, there was also something else. A sense of purpose, a bond forming between him and Serenya, fragile yet undeniable. For the first time since leaving Earth, Daniel felt that maybe, just maybe, he belonged here. The palace seemed calm on the surface, but beneath the polished crystal floors, whispers were spreading like cracks in ice. News of the prophecy stirred hope in some hearts and anger in others. Nobles debated in hidden chambers. Guards spoke in hushed voices, and merchants in the city carried tales that twisted with each retelling. Some said the human envoy was chosen by fate. Others said he had bewitched the princess with strange earth magic. Daniel felt the weight of those whispers every time he walked through the halls. Guards who once ignored him now watched him with unreadable expressions. Servants bowed lower, but their eyes lingered too long. The envoys from Earth kept their distance as though afraid his presence might bring trouble upon them. Only Princess Serenya remained steady. When they walked side by side, her presence was like a calm tide holding back the storm. She spoke little in public, but in private she shared her thoughts freely, teaching Daniel about her people's ways. Each word she gave him felt like a gift, and though he feared the world turning against him, he found strength in her quiet certainty. One evening, Serenya invited him to the royal gardens. The air was filled with the scent of silver-leafed trees, their branches glowing softly under the night sky. Small winged creatures drifted between flowers, leaving trails of faint light in their wake. For the first time since arriving, Daniel felt a sense of peace. "You carry yourself like one carrying stones," Serenia said, as they walked along a path lined with crystal fountains. Daniel gave a tired smile. "Feels more like boulders. Everyone stares at me like I don't belong here. Like I've done something terrible." "You did nothing terrible," Serenia replied. "You spoke. That is all. My people fear what they cannot control. They have lived in silence for too long." Daniel stopped, looking at her. "Do you really believe it's prophecy? That it had to be me?" Serenia turned her eyes toward the stars above. "I do. I have felt the weight of silence all my life, bound by tradition, unable to speak what lay in my heart. But when you spoke, I felt the world change. It may not matter if you meant the words or not. You gave me freedom." Daniel's chest tightened. He wanted to tell her he believed too. But before he could, a rustle in the trees caught his ear. He turned, scanning the shadows. Figures stepped out from the darkness. 6 of them, cloaked and masked, their movements sharp and deliberate. Their weapons shimmered faintly, curved blades unlike anything Daniel had seen before. Serenia stiffened. "Rebels," she whispered. The cloaked figures spread out, cutting off the path behind them. One stepped forward, his voice low and harsh. "The princess will come with us. The human has no place here." Daniel's heart pounded. His instincts screamed at him to run, but his feet stayed rooted. He stepped in front of Serenia, raising his hands though he had no weapon. "Stay back," he said, though his voice trembled. The rebel leader laughed coldly. "You think you can stop us, off-worlder? You are nothing!" The nearest rebel lunged, blade flashing in the dim light. Daniel barely had time to think. He grabbed a loose stone from the garden path and swung it wildly. The strike caught the rebel's wrist, knocking the blade aside. Surprised, the attacker stumbled, and Daniel shoved him backward into a fountain. "Run!" Daniel hissed to Serenia, but she did not move. Her eyes blazed with calm defiance. Another rebel charged. Daniel ducked, feeling the blade whistle past his ear. He grabbed a branch from one of the glowing trees and swung it like a staff. It cracked against the attacker's shoulder, sending sparks of light flying from the branch. The rebel staggered but did not fall. The leader snarled, "Take them alive!" The rebels closed in. Daniel fought clumsily, each movement driven by fear and instinct rather than skill. He blocked one strike with the branch, only to feel another blade slash across his sleeve. Pain burned along his arm, but he held his ground. Serenia moved behind him, her hands glowing faintly as if summoning some power. But she hesitated, bound by rules he could not see. Daniel's breath came fast, his muscles screaming. He could not win, not against so many. But he remembered Serenia's words. "You gave me freedom." He would not let her be taken back into silence. With a desperate shout, he swung the branch low, knocking one rebel's legs out from under him. The attacker crashed to the ground, groaning. Another rushed in, but Daniel grabbed the fallen blade and held it out awkwardly. He did not know how to use it, but the sight of steel made the rebels pause. "Enough," Serenia said suddenly. Her voice rang with power, carrying farther than Daniel had ever heard. The rebels froze, their eyes wide. She stepped forward, her hand resting lightly on Daniel's shoulder. "You will not touch him. You will not take me." The leader hesitated. For a moment it seemed he might defy her, but the weight of her words pressed down on them all, like the stillness before a storm. Slowly he signaled the others to retreat. With bitter glares the rebels vanished back into the shadows. Daniel dropped the blade, his chest heaving. Sweat dripped down his forehead and his arm throbbed from the cut. Serenia placed a steadying hand on him. "You stood against them," she said softly. "With no training, no weapon, only courage. Do you see now why the prophecy chose you?" Daniel shook his head, still trembling. "I only got lucky. If they'd wanted to kill me..." "They did not," Serenia interrupted. "They wanted to take me, and you stopped them, not with skill but with spirit. That is what my people have forgotten. That is what only humans can remind us." Her words sank deep into him. For the first time, Daniel saw himself not as a mistake, but as someone who might truly matter. The next day, the council gathered in uproar. News of the rebel attack had spread, and the palace buzzed with rumors. Some nobles demanded stronger walls. Others demanded punishment for the rebels' sympathizers, but many turned their eyes toward Daniel. "He is the reason they attacked," one shouted. The prophecy is nothing but a tale, and this human's presence has stirred unrest. He defended the princess, another countered. Without him, she might have been taken. Can we not see the signs? The arguments grew louder, voices clashing like storm waves. Daniel stood at Serenya's side, feeling small beneath the weight of so many powerful eyes. Yet when he glanced at her, she gave him the faintest nod, a silent promise that he was not alone. The king finally raised his hand, silencing the hall. His voice was calm but heavy. Enough, we will not decide today. But know this, the world is changing. Whether by chance or by prophecy, the human's words have set us on a new path. We must tread carefully for all our sakes. Daniel bowed his head, unsure if the king saw him as savior or threat. But as the council dispersed, Serenya leaned close and whispered only for him to hear. You fought for me, she said, and I will fight for you. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Her words filled Daniel with a warmth stronger than any fear. The whispers of rebellion had not ended, but now he knew. He was no longer just a guest in this world. He was part of its story. The council chamber glowed with cold light, its walls carved from crystal that captured every sound and made it echo. Daniel stood at the center of the circle, surrounded by rows of nobles whose eyes bore into him like blades. Princess Serenya stood at his side, her face calm but her posture firm, as if bracing against an invisible storm. The events of the garden had spread through the empire like wildfire. Some spoke of Daniel as a hero who had defended the princess against assassins. Others claimed his presence had drawn the rebels to strike in the first place. Whichever tale people believed, all agreed on one thing. The prophecy had awakened, and nothing could ever return to silence. The king sat high above them, his silver hair catching the light, his expression unreadable. The queen sat beside him, her gaze softer but no less piercing. Around them, the council of elders leaned forward, waiting to hear what judgment would be given. Ambassador Green was present too, standing apart from Daniel. His face was pale, his jaw tight as though he wanted to speak but feared the weight of the room. One of the elders rose first, her voice sharp. This human has disturbed our order. He has spoken words that were not meant for outsiders. If we allow this, our traditions crumble. Another elder stood. Yet he defended the princess when rebels sought her life. Can we ignore such courage? The chamber filled with murmurs, voices clashing back and forth. Some called Daniel a chosen one, others an intruder. Daniel listened, his stomach twisting. He wanted to protest, to explain it had all been a mistake, but every word stuck in his throat. He was no politician, no soldier. He was just a man who had stumbled into the wrong phrase and found himself chained to destiny. At last, the king raised his hand. Silence fell. His voice carried steady and deep. Daniel Hayes of Earth, you have spoken words that bound you to my daughter in the eyes of prophecy. Yet whether it is fate or folly remains to be seen. You will speak now. Do you deny what was said? Daniel's heart pounded. He knew this was the moment. If he denied it, perhaps they would release him, send him home, and Earth's relations with the Empire would remain untouched. But to deny it would also mean breaking the fragile bond he had begun to share with Serenya. He looked at her. She met his eyes, her expression steady, her silence filled with trust. In that moment, he knew what his answer had to be. I made a mistake with your language, Daniel said slowly, his voice trembling but clear. I did not mean to speak those words at first. But since that moment, I have come to see their truth. I do not take them back. I meant them when I spoke to Serenya later, and I mean them now. Gasps rippled through the chamber. Some elders leaned forward, their eyes wide with shock. Others scowled, whispering to one another. The king's gaze narrowed. You admit it then. You stand by those words, knowing what they mean to us? I do, Daniel said. His hands trembled, but his voice grew stronger. Because they are not just words. They are my truth. A long silence followed. Every eye turned toward Serenya, waiting to see how she would respond. She stepped forward, lifting her chin. I have been silent all my life, she said, her voice clear and ringing, bound by rules older than memory, forbidden to speak what lay within me. But Daniel's words broke that silence. He gave me back my voice. I will not return to chains. I choose him. I choose this path. Her declaration struck the chamber like a bolt of lightning. Nobles erupted in protest. Some shouted that it was blasphemy, others that it was destiny fulfilled. The council dissolved into chaos, voices clashing and echoing until the chamber shook with the weight of them. The king rose slowly, his face unreadable. He lifted his hand and the noise quieted. His gaze moved from his daughter to Daniel, then back again. "So it is choice you claim," he said at last.
"Very well."
"Then know this, your choice will not be without cost. If you bind yourself to the human, you defy centuries of order. The Empire will not stand united. You invite war upon us. Then let it be so," Serenia answered firmly. "I will not turn away." Daniel felt his chest tighten. He had not expected her to speak so boldly, to stand before her father and council and defy tradition for him. In that moment, he realized just how much courage she carried within her calm silence. The queen leaned forward, her eyes thoughtful. "Perhaps war comes whether we choose or not," she said softly. "The rebels already rise. Maybe this is not the cause, but the cure." Her words left the council unsettled, but no final judgment came that day. The king dismissed the gathering, saying only that time would reveal the truth of prophecy. That evening, Daniel and Serenia met again in the gardens, where the memory of the ambush still lingered in Daniel's mind. The night air was cool, the stars stretching endlessly above. "You risked everything for me," Daniel said quietly. "Even against your father, why?" Serenia's gaze softened. "Because silence has no future. My people have forgotten how to listen to the heart. You reminded me what it means to speak it. That is worth any risk." Daniel swallowed hard, emotion rising in his chest. "I never wanted this. I never wanted to be the center of all this chaos." "I know," Serenia replied gently, "but sometimes destiny does not ask what we want. It only asks if we will stand when the moment comes." Daniel looked at her, seeing both strength and vulnerability in her eyes. He realized then that this was not just about prophecy or politics or even tradition. It was about two people who had found something real in the middle of it all. "I'll stand," he said quietly. "For you. For us." She smiled faintly, a rare warmth lighting her face. "Then we will face whatever comes together." But not all welcomed their bond. In the city below, whispers of rebellion grew louder. Leaders of the uprising spread lies, claiming the humans sought to enslave the royal line. They painted Daniel as a usurper, a foreigner who dared to steal their princess. The anger of the streets began to burn, and the threat of open conflict loomed ever closer. Inside the palace, guards grew uneasy. Some swore loyalty to Serenia, others whispered doubts. The court divided into factions, each plotting in silence. Daniel could feel the tension like a storm on the horizon. He had chosen his path, but now that choice weighed heavily. He knew the rebels would not stop. They would strike again, stronger than before. And when they did, the empire would either shatter or rise anew. Late at night, Daniel stood at the balcony of his chamber, staring at the endless stars. He thought of Earth, of home, of the simple life he had left behind. And then he thought of Serenia, of her courage, her voice, her unbroken spirit. Whatever came next, he knew there was no turning back. He had spoken the words. He had chosen to stand. The weight of choice rested on his shoulders now, not just for himself, but for an empire caught between silence and change. The palace no longer felt safe. Guards walked the halls with tense expressions, and servants whispered in corners, afraid to speak too loudly. Rumors of rebellion grew stronger with every passing day. Some claimed entire provinces had already declared against the throne. Others said rebel fleets gathered beyond the stars, waiting for the signal to strike. Daniel felt the weight of it all pressing down on him. He had been a stranger, an outsider, but now he stood at the heart of an empire's storm. Wherever he walked, eyes followed. Some were filled with hope, others with distrust. He knew he could not escape the truth. His words had changed everything. Princess Serenia walked beside him each day, calm as ever, though he could see the fire in her eyes. She had spoken boldly in the council, and now her people either adored her as the voice of change or condemned her as a betrayer of tradition. One evening, they stood together on the balcony overlooking the city. Below, faint fires burned in the streets where protests had turned violent. "They will come soon," Serenia said quietly. "The rebels will not wait much longer." Daniel nodded, his chest tight. "And when they do, then we must decide whether we are only words or if we are action." The attack came sooner than anyone expected. It was just before dawn when the sky filled with fire. Rebel ships broke through the planetary shields, their dark hulls blotting out the stars. Sirens wailed across the palace, guards rushing to defensive posts. Daniel was shaken awake by a soldier who pulled him through the corridors toward the inner stronghold. But Serenia refused to hide. She stood tall in the great hall, her robes flowing like liquid silver, her gaze fixed on the horizon where explosions lit the sky. "Take her below," one general urged. Fear etched across his face. "No," Serenia said firmly. "If I hide, my people will see only weakness. If I stand, they may yet remember hope." Daniel felt torn between fear and awe. He wanted to protect her, to drag her somewhere safe, but he knew she was right. Hiding would only feed the rebels' lies. She had to be seen, and she had to be heard. The king entered then, his armor shining faintly in the firelight. His face was grim, but there was pride in his eyes as he looked at his daughter. "You defied me," he said quietly. "Yes," Serenia replied without hesitation. The king's lips curved in the faintest smile. "Then prove you were right." The palace gates shook as rebel soldiers forced their way inside. The clash of steel and bursts of energy filled the air. Daniel found himself swept into the chaos, fighting not with weapons but with sheer determination to survive. He ducked, dodged, and shoved enemies aside, his heart racing. Serenia moved like a beacon in the storm. Wherever she went, loyal guards rallied around her, their courage renewed by her presence. She raised her voice, clear and strong, echoing through the great halls. "My people," she cried even as the battle raged. "We have lived in silence too long. We have forgotten how to choose, how to speak. Today I choose. I choose a new path, a new beginning. Stand with me, not as subjects bound by fear, but as voices free to be heard." Her words carried through the palace, amplified by the ancient crystals in the walls. Soldiers who had wavered now steadied. Civilians who had hidden began to emerge, their courage awakening. The rebels pressed harder, but the tide began to shift. For every soldier who raised a weapon in anger, another lowered it in doubt, shaken by Serenia's defiance. Daniel found himself face to face with the rebel leader, a tall figure clad in dark armor. The man's eyes burned with hatred. "You," the leader snarled. "The outsider? The false one who dares to claim her heart. This empire does not belong to you." Daniel's hands shook. He had no weapon, no training, but he stood his ground. "I never asked for it," he said, his voice raw. "I never wanted to take anything from you. But I will not run. I love her. And I will not let your lies destroy what she has built." The rebel lunged, but before his strike could land, Serenia stepped between them. Her voice cut through the clash like steel. "Enough," she commanded. "If you seek to end me, then end me here. But know this. If you destroy me, you destroy the very hope you claim to fight for." The rebel leader hesitated, his blade trembling. Around them silence spread as both sides froze, waiting. Serenia's eyes blazed with truth. "This empire is not chains," she said. "It can be more. It can be choice. It can be voice. But only if we stop fighting shadows and begin building together." The rebel leader's hand shook. For a moment, Daniel thought he would strike anyway. But then, slowly, the weapon lowered. The silence broke as soldiers on both sides dropped their arms. The battle ended not with victory, but with a choice made in the face of truth. Days later, the city began to heal. Fires were extinguished, wounds tended, and walls rebuilt. The rebels were not punished, but brought into the fold, given a place at the table where decisions would be shared, not imposed. For the first time in living memory, the empire listened not only to rulers, but to voices long ignored. Daniel walked through the streets with Serenia, watching people greet her not with silent bows but with open words, laughter, and tears. Change was slow, but it was real. "You did it," Daniel said softly. "No," Serenia corrected with a small smile. "We did it. You gave me the courage to break my silence." Daniel felt warmth spread through him. He had never believed himself a hero, but in her eyes he saw that even the smallest voice could spark something greater. The king called them before the council once more. The chamber was still scarred from the day of chaos, but now it felt different. The elders looked not with anger, but with cautious respect. The prophecy spoke of words that would awaken our world. The king said slowly, perhaps it was not the words alone, but the choice behind them. "You, Daniel of Earth," spoke, and my daughter answered. "Together you have changed us." He turned to Serenia, his gaze both proud and heavy. "The crown will one day be yours. Lead them well." Serenia bowed her head. "I will, father." Not as a queen who commands silence, but as a voice among many. Then the king looked at Daniel. His expression softened, though it still carried the weight of centuries. "And you, human? You came here as a mistake, a visitor who spoke the wrong phrase. But perhaps no phrase was ever more right. Daniel felt his throat tighten, unable to find words. He simply nodded, his heart full. That night, Daniel and Serenia returned to the garden where it all began. The air was quiet, the stars bright above them. It was here he had first spoken the words by accident, and here they had changed everything. "I still can't believe it," Daniel said with a faint laugh. "One mistake and suddenly I'm standing in the middle of history." Serenia looked at him, her eyes soft. "Not a mistake, a beginning." She reached out, taking his hand in hers. For a long moment they stood in silence. Not the silence of chains, but the silence of peace, where nothing needed to be said because everything had already been spoken. Daniel squeezed her hand gently. "So what now?" Serenia smiled. "Now we build. Together." And under the endless stars, with the echoes of war fading into memory, they began their future, not as a prophecy fulfilled by fate, but as a choice made by two voices that refused to be silent.